I ticked all the boxes I thought would make me happy, and I still wasn't happy. I said, geez, what's wrong with me? It's enough. And Facebook brought me in as kind of one of the case studies as someone who was using Facebook well and failed. You've shown yourself it's not possible to do the fitness thing. I was just lost. And for some reason, I latched onto an idea at that time, like a vision that I'm going to get the Late Late Show someday to tell my redemption story. I don't know, a couple of years later, I end up on the Late Late Show telling the story of 5 clients to 20,000.
How did you know it was time to change?
You have to be willing to listen to yourself. I was big into like the law of attraction and stuff at that time, and I just talked things into existence. And I wrote on Facebook that I've just finished my first book. Would anyone like to publish? And I hadn't even started the book. They say we're driven by inspiration or desperation. Because my kind of philosophy in life is that you come in to the world and you're given a body and you've lessons to learn in your lifetime. And you get experiences and people come into your life to help you learn those lessons. And you can
Hey there, and welcome to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you're passionate about staying fit, healthy, and mentally sharp, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Cooney, and each week we dive into the latest trends, expert insights, and actionable tips to help you take your fitness, nutrition, and mental well-being to the next level. Ready to level up your health and fitness? Let's jump in and get started.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle podcast. Today is a very special episode for a couple of reasons. Number one is I'm actually recording in a beautiful podcast studio in Bali. And number two is I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Pat Divilly.
What's up, man? Good
Pat,
to be here. The
how are
Irish
you?
boys in Bali, yeah?
Yeah, it's there's actually quite a few Irish out here, which is
Drinking coconuts far from
yeah. And thanks a million for joining me today. Obviously, with the new book coming out, I know your schedule is really busy, so I really appreciate your time. And first question, how are you finding Bali and what's your first time being here?
Yeah, I'm loving it so far. I was saying to you, I was just finding the lifestyle a little bit harder at home as I get a bit older. So yeah, just really appreciating the lifestyle out here. Back home I was just working all the time and I love my work, but since coming here, it's just a bit more freedom. I suppose the weather helps when it's not raining. It's an easy place to be healthy for the most part. There's a lot of similar community. I think that's the biggest piece, is like working online.
Yeah.
It's a dream in one sense, but it can be kind of isolating if all your friends are working 9 to 5 at home and you're kind of on a different buzz. So here, just meeting interesting people in the saunas or in the gyms or whatever else, and it's been great so far.
Yeah. And it's like for health and wellness out here, it's just become a hub. I think it's you wouldn't actually believe it. You know, when you think of like Bali or how it's just turned into this. Even for me, I'm here. It's 2020. Well, been coming here, and to see it, what it is even now, even where we are now, like 3 years ago, none of this is just, there's nothing here, only literally Victory Gym. Up that was like, we'd go to that and it was like you're in the wilderness. Yeah. And now it's just completely built up.
It's like Hollywood. Someone said it's like Hollywood. You walk around, it's kind of intimidating because everyone's got 6 packs and tattoos and tan and like cool looking or whatever. But yeah, it's that's amazing. It's really grateful to be here, and I'm glad I humbled myself because for years I would see people going to Bali and I kind of throw my eyes up to heaven and I thought, oh, everyone's there. So there's a part of me that's a rebel that doesn't want to do what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
And I actually came for 2 weeks last year just on a whim, and straight away I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
It has all the bits that I thought, oh, I'd throw my eyes up to heaven. It has that too, of course, like the entitlement and the kind of. But the people are beautiful. The locals are amazing. There's so much variety in terms of like surf, certain areas, free dive. You can go to the mountains.
And I think that's it. Online, there is that side of it, but when you're here, I don't see it that much, you know, unless you choose to. But it's like there's this whole other lifestyle that someone was actually joking the other day. Yeah, it's like people live 2 lives here. There is that one side, then there's just a healthy lifestyle. People working, just good. It's a really good environment to be in, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just one of those places, like you said, it's kind of like when you come here, I find even every time I come back, I like it even more.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I get it. I get what people talk about here, you know.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I want to, obviously you have a new book coming out. What date is it released?
I think it's 27th of February. I should really know that. I think it's 27th of February, so maybe after the podcast.
I was just going to say, I was like, I think this will be released next week. So by the time this is released, Should be, yeah, just about.
Around, yeah.
And you'll be back in Ireland doing a few events as well.
Yeah, flying back on Wednesday, which is 2 days away, and yeah, going to be 2.5 weeks of lots of podcasts and doing a couple of events, Dublin, Belfast, Cork, Galway. So it'll be a bit of a whirlwind 2 weeks, but definitely looking forward to it. And yeah, that's the next step.
And I'll leave links in the show notes to grab tickets. Nearly choking on my water. So I do want to get into the book, but first I'd love to go back in time and just give people a bit of a background about you and your journey, because some people listen to podcasts might not know who you are. Most people do, I think, at this stage. But yeah, if you want to kind of go back in time a bit and just share with the audience how we are in this, how we got here.
We got I got the belly on the cheap flight. My background was fitness, similar to yourself. So I was kind of bullied a good bit when I was younger and had a lot of insecurity. And in my teens, I found martial arts and I found weight training, and those were the two things that were the first things in life that gave me a sense of confidence and a sense of identity. So I took up judo when I was 15, started lifting weights, and started winning Irish titles in judo in school. Not because I was very good, but just because not many guys were doing it. I'd only get beaten by the Eastern Europeans back then. But that became a bit of my identity. You know, I was then known as the fitness guy or the martial arts guy from a young age. And I knew from the time I set foot in the gym that it was what I wanted to do. Then came out of college 2009, I think it was, something like that. And obviously the industry wasn't what it is today, so I was trying my best to get businesses off the ground and struggling and failing. And I went to America for a couple of summers in cage fought out there when I was 18 and 19. And that kind of opened my eyes to kettlebells and TRX and all these things that hadn't really taken off yet in Ireland. So I think that showed me possibilities just in terms of warehouse gyms, and this is probably even before CrossFit was a big thing. But anyway, I failed with a couple of businesses, and then I started again down in Galway with a boot camp on the beach back in 2012. And I always tell people, like, 21, 22, I had these massive grandiose ambitions. And I see it a lot around here with the young guys that are trainers that want to be 6-figure trainers and 7-figure trainers and all this. And I wanted 100 clients, and I wanted 1,000 clients and all this kind of stuff as a young man. I didn't even have like 5 clients. I was, when I was in Dublin, and I was just obsessed with getting somewhere. It just was like massive disconnect between where I was and where I wanted to be. It just created so much stress in my life, and also how I was portraying myself on Facebook back then. That I was successful, but in reality, I was failing miserably. But I came back to Galway, started with 5 clients on the beach, and when I humbled myself again, and it's probably a common theme is trying to humble myself, is I thought, wow, I've got 5 people here that believe in me, and if I believe in them, it's going to kind of grow. And ultimately it grew, and I went to 20,000 clients in 5 years with online courses, which was kind of my whole life changed, I guess. I could go on and on.
Yeah, I was going to say so it was 2009 you started. When did you start online, actually?
2012, I started on the beach in Galway, and basically what had happened was I had 5 clients the first month. Second month, I think I had 20 clients. It was just word of mouth. Third month, I probably had 100. And obviously Galway, it's raining all the time, so there's pictures going up online of people training in the rain. And of course, a lot of our generation would have immigrated to Australia and stuff at the time. So I started getting a few emails from people. This is pre-online training, so 2013, people started emailing me saying, "What's going on at the beach in Galway? I've immigrated, I want to get involved." And I thought, I'll just bring this online.
Yeah.
And back then it was literally a PDF. I would copy other people's links to demos of exercises from YouTube, and I set up Facebook groups. I didn't even have Facebook groups, I think, at the start. And then the online started taking off, and Facebook brought me in as kind of one of the case studies as someone who was using Facebook well, and I think I scaled to I made a lot of money without a website, basically.
Yeah.
Facebook brought me in and said, this guy's like changed his life using Facebook. That was the fitness stuff.
Yeah, because I remember, obviously you won't say it, but you were essentially like the OG fitness online coach in Ireland. Because I started in 2015, and I think you were the only person that I knew of doing it. Maybe Brian Keane at the time. And it's funny, even for me, like, I started in 2015. If you asked me in 2013 what online coaching was, I didn't know. I didn't even know it was a job. And it's funny because even one of my first clients was one of my friends, and they would have been in one of your groups, Facebook groups or something. And I remember being like, so what did Pat do with you? But what did that look like? Because back then, like, it's not like it is now. There was no blueprint for online coaching. There was no like, this is how this job is meant to work.
Yeah.
You know, which obviously brings about its own challenges and stresses.
Yeah.
And
Funnily, that was probably a blessing for me because, you know, there's a part of me, I think part of a lot of us, that if we know how it's supposed to be done, we try to get it right. And I didn't have to get it right because there's no way of getting it wrong. It hadn't been done, so you kind of have that creativity. And yeah, Brian's great. I mean, Brian's kind of flying it since. And Brian actually told me that he was a teacher in England, and someone in the staff room mentioned that I was doing these classes and I had an online fitness program. He said that was the thing, or one of the things that prompted him to pursue the fitness stuff and come back home. So he was around the same time. But yeah, when you don't know the rules, you just break them all and just give it a go and learn as you go. Yeah, it was all, the biggest piece I had going was community, the community aspect. Like, I recognised that was the missing link. And, you know, guys like Rob Lipset obviously were coming in and had a different thing. They were working more with physique and younger guys, and I was working with, it's funny because I was 22, 23 and I was working with middle-aged women mostly, you know, and I didn't know what it was to be in their shoes, but for some reason the community aspect really made it grow.
And it's funny, I think community is the buzzword at the moment, the last like year.
Yeah.
And you were 12 years ahead of the game with that, which is funny. And when did you then decide to move on from coaching and fitness in general?
It was funny, you know, when I really struggled with my mental health, you know, multiple times in my life, but when I failed with a business in Dublin and came back home, and was just so unsure of myself, and I didn't have anyone in the industry that I could look to as someone to model, and everyone around me was telling me, it's just like, you've already failed, you've shown yourself it's not possible to do the fitness thing. I was just lost. And for some reason I latched on to like an idea at that time, like a vision that I'm going to get the Late Late Show someday to tell my redemption story. And maybe, I don't know, a couple of years later I end up on the Late Late Show telling the story of 5 clients to 20,000, all this kind of stuff. And I think in or around that time, I just knew in my gut, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Because my kind of philosophy in life is that you come in to the world and you're given a body and you have lessons to learn in your lifetime. And you get experiences and people come into your life to help you learn those lessons. And you can either just keep doing the same lesson again and again, or ignoring the lesson again and again, or you learn the lesson and then you kind of leave that chapter behind and you step into something new. I know that's not for everyone, but my ego at that stage would have thought, okay, just on the Late Late, my profile's going to get bigger, let's scale the business. But I was just like, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. It was around the same time. And it was partially working with so many people and seeing that like, there was more than training and nutrition to it, because most people probably weren't getting great results, you know. It's the reality of the group programs.
Yeah.
And you're kind of curious, like, why are they all getting the same support but different results? So that made me curious about the mind. And then my own mind was, you know, I ticked all the boxes I thought would make me happy, and I still wasn't happy. I said, geez, what's wrong with me? So I need to figure myself out. So I walked away from all that and then started exploring meditation and yoga, and I've been not enough yoga the way my mobility is now. But yeah, that took me down a path of personal development, I suppose. I had been very diligent with goal setting and time management and that kind of stuff, like from a young age, in terms of reading the books about success. But I think when I got to 28 and achieved all the goals, I realized that success is something to aspire to, yeah, but it depends where it's driven from. And I was driven a lot from insecurity as opposed to doing what I wanted to do. I was just trying to prove people wrong, people that didn't believe in me, you know.
Yeah.
So 28, I think, started shifting into the other stuff.
Yeah. And then you went into kind of mindset coaching, author with the Fit Mind.
Yeah, you know, my first book was in the fitness state. My first book was 2013, and I was on Facebook, and I was big into like the law of attraction and stuff at that time. And I just thought things into existence, and I wrote on Facebook that I just finished my first book. Would anyone like to publish? And I hadn't even started with a book. And a publisher contacted me and they said, oh, you're popular, you've got a lot of people on social media. How's the book? And I said, oh, give me 3 more weeks and it'll be done. I just have to make some edits. So I said, I'll try to write this book. And I wrote the book. And it was only a small little fitness guide, but I think it got to #1. I can't remember. It did well in Ireland at the time, and did book signings and all this stuff. But yeah, that was the first book. But at 28, I started doing workshops. I was very fearful of public speaking, so one of the things I set out to do was 100 public speaking sessions in a year to kind of overcome the fear. So free sessions, like colleges, schools, small businesses, big businesses, people's houses, so to speak, anywhere. And I started doing workshops, retreats. It's kind of 2-hour sessions in the evening where people could come and learn the simple tools that I was kind of applying. So I did that for a couple of years, a lot of corporate work. Then I got into men's work, then I got into breath work. So it's kind of been, in very simple language, I would say, I started with physical fitness. Then I got quite curious about mental fitness. And then I got curious about emotional fitness because I recognized that mentally you can be in a good place, or at least you can perceive yourself to be in a good place. Like everything can look like it's where it's supposed to be in your life. But emotionally, sometimes you can feel some kind of disruptions too. So like, I have everything I want, but I still don't feel settled in myself. That points to the emotional piece, so that kind of got me into that the last couple of years. So now my work is mind-body connection and breath work, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because that's very similar to kind of me as well. Like I would have started with training, nutrition, best one to six pack when I was young. And it was like I thought six pack would solve my life problems, and got obsessed with that. And then get to a point, and for me it was probably always around about how can I get better results. And then when I started coaching people, like you said, it's like, why aren't these people getting results? So I'm like, this is the science, this is the training, this is the nutrition. Why is it not working? And then I started to go into lifestyle and mindset because I started to realize, okay, actually your stress, your sleep, these things affect you. And then from that, I started to go to the mindset where it's like, okay, there's always going to be something that holds people back. And you just see it a lot with, I think, nutrition and people, I suppose, failing over and over, going through the same patterns of behaviors. And you're kind of like, but this is, I'm telling you what to do, but you're doing this. How is it not connecting? And then you start to actually delve into kind of personal development mindset, and you realize, I suppose, first you realize that you don't know as much as you think you know. And then, it is kind of this natural progression, I think, where it starts with the physical, goes on. And even for myself, a lot of my start working out was, looking back now in hindsight, just insecurity. So it's like, if I can just build this armor outside me, I'll be fine. And I always say to people, I spent years working out when I should have been working in. And then it's not until, in hindsight now, being a bit older, it's always, when you look back. But that's something I wanted to ask you is, obviously you've had a lot of changes in life or even in your path. And the word I would use more is evolving, I think. I think human evolution, we're meant to evolve, but how did you know it was time to change? Because I think a lot of people, even maybe listening, like you said, there's something in them, they know that there's maybe another path in life, but they don't take it. They stay stuck maybe for years or could be the whole life. So how did you know it's time to change?
There's a couple of ways. Maybe I can just frame it with something I'm a big proponent and fan of is something called the hero's journey, which is Joseph Campbell was a mythologist, so he looked at all the different myths and stories that were told across all the different cultures, and he recognized this very common story that was within all stories. So it's called the hero's journey. So you'd see it in Harry Potter or Star Wars or your favorite footballer's life story, anything you kind of aspire to. The reason we're connected to story is because we see ourselves in the journey. So I'll always say to people, you'd never watch a film where the hero gets up in the morning and has a lovely day and goes to bed in the evening. You watch it because there's ups and downs and they're challenged and they don't know what's going on. So the hero's journey arcs this sort of, it basically shows within the psyche what's happening when you're ready to change or when you're being called to change. And there's many different stages, so to keep it simple, you wake up in the morning and you have a call to adventure. So there's something in you that says, I need to change, something needs to change. Sometimes you get to make that choice. And I always say, like, if you ignore that voice for long enough, then nature will make you make the choice. Kind of like if you ignore your health for long enough, the doctor's going to tell you you're sick. So you get this call, you get this nudge inside, something needs to change, whether it's my work, or I need to take up a hobby, or I need to leave the relationship, or I need to start, whatever it is. And most people refuse the call, as you mentioned. And you might refuse it a couple of times, and then eventually things get painful enough that you say, right, I'm going to change. And what happens is you're called into this adventure where basically how you see yourself is challenged because you step into the unknown. And as you step into the unknown, you meet parts of yourself that you've kind of hidden away from. So, simple example, if you've never been in a relationship and you create a relationship, and step into the unknown and being in a relationship, you're going to have to meet your insecurities and your fears and lots of aspects of yourself. So a lot of people go back to the certainty of home or where they were before. But you got to push through. And in the hero's journey, or the stories that we connect to, generally the hero has a moment where they fight the dragon, or they have a big kind of standoff with themselves, and they transform. There's a death and a rebirth, and then they come back. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense for people, but that's how I see it. In terms of how I know, I'm highly sensitive, and so as much as I'd love to be able to ignore, because business sense, I don't have business sense sometimes. I'll just walk away from the thing and not kind of. I remember I had an email list of 25,000 people in the fitness days, and if I had any sense, I would have kept the email list and emailed them about personal development. But I was like, nah, I'm burning everything to the ground. I'm deleting the email list. I'm going to start again.
Someone in business right now is pulling off their hair.
Yeah, and I'm glad I did that way. But more specifically, I guess to the question you asked about people that are struggling with change, I think sometimes there's a black and white mentality. I am kind of black and white, but I wouldn't tell people to do it the way I do it. Some people it'll suit, other people won't. But rather than thinking it has to be this or it has to be this, there's oftentimes a lot of grey area. So someone might say, I hate my job, but I can't leave it. And it could be, well, you could start something on the side, you could start a college course on the side. I think it's just about taking some form of action in the direction where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
That's the key to change, no matter how small. It's kind of a weird story, but my friend years ago worked in a factory, and he said all the boys on the factory line were miserable, they hated it. And one fella would show up every day and super happy, like just smiling. And they said, how do you like this job? This is the worst job in the world. And he says, I know it's the worst job in the world. I said, why are you always smiling? And he said, well, every day I come here, I save some money, and someday I'm going to work in a safari, because that's my dream. And so he had a reason to go to work, because he's putting money aside for his eventual dream. And so he had a different mentality doing the same thing. One by one, they left the factory, and he was the last one left. And then I think 10 years passed, and nobody had seen him. And then sure enough, they bumped into him. Oh, I'm just home from Africa, I'm working in a safari now. So your dream doesn't start the day that you actually make the big leap. It starts the day you make a genuine commitment to yourself that, okay, I'm going to lean in a new direction.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah, it's not about just going, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm burning the bridge. It's like just getting a general direction of where you want to go.
Yeah. So Tony Robbins used to talk about like two roads going parallel to one another, and they're going to end up in the same place. But if one shifts by 1 degree, it doesn't make much difference in a mile, but over 100 miles they end up in very different places. So it's the small simple things we do daily that kind of dictate where we go in life. But I guess the other piece when it comes to change is you have to be willing to listen to yourself. I was looking at something this morning, and I was talking about like, we live in an information age where there's so much information.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we consume so much information is because it helps distract us from the voice that wants to make the scary move. So if you make a bit of space for yourself, whether it's journaling or it's sitting in silence for 10 minutes in the morning, and listen to what comes up, and then you don't have to do anything with it straight away, but just give yourself that space.
It's actually one of my biggest lessons from the last year was you'll solve any problem you have if you just give yourself space. You just don't even try and solve it, just give yourself time. And even journaling, like you end up figuring it out, you know, because again, you don't get those, I would say, you can't see the lid when you're inside the bottle. So when you're stressed and running around going, like, you don't find the answers to your problems. It's when you actually step back and give yourself that time that it just comes.
When I started I never liked the word life coaching, but when I started doing that kind of performance coaching years ago, I remember working with someone like really successful or whatever, and I was intimidated by it. And I asked one of my mentors, like, what do I do? And he goes, get over yourself. He said, that guy could talk to the wall for an hour and he'd figure out his problems. So you're not that important. And it was true. It's just like, there's some quote that says, like, all humanity's problems are a result of man not being able to sit in silence with himself, or sit in a room by himself, or something like that. So yeah, just little pockets of time. The one other piece, I guess, is like, I don't have kids, I don't have a family. I had a bit of a financial cushion from the fitness days, and so it wasn't the same drastic leap that it might have been for someone else. So I'm always conscious of that as well, but I wouldn't use kind of family or other things as something, as an excuse, because I think you'll end up presenting them for that. It's just adapting and saying, okay, well, I can't make the big leap, but I can start spending half an hour a day on YouTube studying the thing I'm passionate about, or what's the one thing we can do.
Because I think sometimes fear, it comes down to fear. Like a lot of people will use other things as a disguise for fear, and I know I did it as well. So just a bit background on my story. So I got qualified in fitness, was working in a gym in Ireland, funny enough, it was like 2012 and I was like, the narrative I was saying was, fitness doesn't exist in Ireland. I'm going to Australia I'm going to make it big over there. I think back then, it's like, I'm going to train professional athletes, not knowing that probably need a decade of experience and authority to train professional athletes. So anyway, I went to Australia, took a job in construction for a month just to get myself set up. 2.5 years later, I was doing the same job and saying, yes, I'm definitely going to leave at some point, but not now. And then, unfortunately for me, my first cousin, one of my best friends, tragically passed away suddenly. And that, when you say about change, I remember waking up the next day and this voice in my head was just like, life is too short. Literally like screaming at me. And from that day, I decided I'm leaving my job, going away from Australia, moving back to Ireland, and start coaching. And literally 6 months later, I travelled all over Southeast Asia, waiting list of clients. And that was 2015. That was the start, And part of my mission, I think, is I don't really want that to have to happen to other people for them to go, you know what, I'm going to go for it, or I'm going to actually start. Because I kind of look at it nearly, unfortunately for me, someone I loved had to end for essentially for me to start living that life. And I'm like, if I can, even in this conversation today, if I can just impact one person, that goes. Because like you said, most people will not look after their health until something happens, versus if you really know. And like for me, I knew there was something calling me all the time, but it was just fear, honestly. I was just afraid to change and take that leap.
Yeah.
And then when I did, essentially my hand was forced in a way because of something terrible that happened. I made more progress in my life 1 year than I did in 25 previous to that.
When I was 21, younger even, I was doing my America summers, cage fighting, and I had a mentor who was 10 years older than me, and he was a fitness guy, he was a kettlebell guy. I wanted to be a martial artist. And I was doing an arts degree in Galway at the time. And I used to say arts was the thing if you didn't know what you wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew since I was 15 I wanted to be a fitness trainer, but it wasn't realistic.
Yeah.
And my mentor took his own life. I was 18, I was younger again. I was 18, I think, 19. He was 10 years older, and I thought, that was the wake-up call for me, I think. I was like, I need to do the fitness thing for him. So yeah, sometimes it's they say we're driven by inspiration or desperation. But I do think, and you probably had this experience, the more you start to make decisions for yourself rather than letting the world make the decision for you, the more confidence you develop to make those kind of steps. So like the first time I stepped away from something that was scary, and then you survive and you get evidence that you can do this, and then it's progressively easier to listen. And I think raising a consciousness or developing is really about, can I change without having to get to a desperate place? So at first it takes a desperate place, maybe the second time it takes maybe a little bit of less desperate place, third time, and over time you just learn to trust life, because you don't have to, it doesn't have to look a certain way for me to be happy, because I've played in different environments. I know, for me, self-confidence really is knowing that whatever happens, you can be with yourself. And control is like, I need the world to be a certain way for me to be okay with myself.
I think your word you said there, it's big, it's trust.
Yeah.
A lot of people, because especially with anything like that, there's uncertainty. So when you're stepping into something that's unknown, you can't know, And I actually said this on last week's podcast, we were talking about uncertainty, and obviously certainty is a primary human need, but if everything in life is certain, why would you live it? Like you said, with going to the cinema, why would you live it? You don't know, you know the outcome of everything, it'd be boring. So you actually need that uncertainty, that bit of fear, like, oh my God, will this work, won't it? And like I said, if you can trust that, you can make it work,
And the trust comes from, I think, two things. One is listening to yourself, and two is, making space to listen to yourself, and two is acting on that voice. You can do those two things progressively, like that changes your life.
That's kind of something else that I wanted to ask you about was, this could be funny because this mightn't have been you, but I remember hearing, I'm sure it was you on a podcast, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, you were talking about, essentially your business had blown up, but you am I right in saying you decided at some point to take a step back that you were like, I don't want, either don't want to do this, or you were like, I don't want to work. You know, you consciously said, right, I don't want to work, 7 days a week or the hours I was. This is only what I'm going to do. Did you do that? No, that's not.
But I walked away from my business. I walked away from the fitness business. I had a gym, and I was a guy working for me at the time, and I asked him to take the gym and put his name above it, and walked away in that regard. But I don't know if the other one would be.
Okay, maybe it wasn't me. I thought it was you that was like, okay, I only want to work this much, or and you kind of decided.
Oh, I might have said that. But I definitely didn't.
Yeah, I was going to say you probably don't even remember the podcast because it was like some random podcast years ago.
I was probably trying to do that, but I get put back into my work.
Yeah.
For good or for bad, I love it. I've been very lucky in the sense that for 37, started 24, so 13 years, getting to do work that I'm passionate about. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. So it doesn't take long to be into something, and then like if I took up salsa dance and I got a salsa dance in school this year, it's just like I can't help but blend the two.
Yeah. And would you find yourself coming from more that overworking kind of mentality?
Yeah, definitely. Like one of my things to work on is, as you mentioned, that we have needs, like certainties. I mean, we all have different human needs, and I think I've probably tried to meet too many of my needs through my work over the years. So like the need for connection is met through my work, the need for validation and approval, the need for growth, the need for contribution. So many needs being met in one place, and it's probably not healthy to meet all your needs in one place, or to try to meet all your needs through one person. You see that with relationships where people think their partner is supposed to be their lover and their best friend and their agony aunt, and there's a lot of pressure on one person. So it's something I would like to improve upon. Bali has helped me with that because I've got more of a lifestyle here, I've got more social connection, I've got more opportunities to meet people and not be looking for everything in my work. So
that's what I found. I definitely come more of that, just overworking, like kind of nearly burning yourself out. And even for me, I think a lot of it I'm better, and that's what you said, like that's why I love traveling and because it pulls me out of my, like, even my partner, if I wasn't with my partner, I'd probably just work like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is also probably not the best. But even on reflection, for me, and I think, I don't know, it's an Irish thing as well, that we're kind of like, just get on and work harder. It was always never, I was like, work hard, not smart, And it's like, I'll just actually, if me and you are doing something, I'll just work harder than you, longer. And that to me was like, I'll be more successful. And I think looking back now and having more awareness, it probably is coming from a place of scarcity and feeling like maybe this could all go away, or it's like maybe I don't deserve it, and that's where I think I found myself. It's like only looking back now that maybe it was coming from a place of fear, which obviously maybe isn't the best motive for working yourself into the ground, Yeah.
Well, I think everything serves a purpose, and I think, like we mentioned earlier, kind of maybe putting on the armor when we're younger, or being driven by insecurity, or having these patterns. And I think we need to go through all that. For men, it's generally around 30. And men could be older a lot of the time. The guys will kind of wake up and say, okay, this got me here, but it's not going to get me maybe where I want to be. So I think, you need the work ethic, you need the drive, you need the vision, you need the relentlessness to some degree. I'm sure people can do it without, but I think for most of us, we have to go that path first, and maybe achieve the things, realize this wasn't everything I thought it would be, and then you start to develop your other aspects. It's kind of like success will teach you a certain amount, but it won't teach you everything. So you have to start there, and you have to start making mistakes, you have to start recognizing your patterns, and that's where the real kind of growth comes. It's like, I don't know, if you're winning every football game you play, you're probably not going to learn a lot, but if you start to lose a couple of games, then you start to see, okay, there's things to work on here. And that's how I see, failures now, or challenges, or old patterns, or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I suppose experience really helps. It's like you even said it there around the age. It's funny, everything you said, I'm like, that happened to me at that age where I started. I got to 30 and I'm like you said, it's nearly your identity was like work. And I think, because I played sport growing up as well, so it's like, that was near my identity. So then sport kind of led into fitness anyway, so it didn't change too much. And then I do find this even with a lot of people that are when they leave that sport, they become lost because they don't have anything else.
Yeah.
And I think work was that for me. And I was like, okay, I need more than work, you know,
Yeah.
as in, so that's where even traveling, different hobbies and stuff like that has really helped me anyway to, and what I found, it actually helps me work better, which is kind of really, once I see the benefit in slowing down, switching off,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, that actually is, there's a better way than doing this, you know.
Yeah. There's I think I have it in the book, this idea of like the midlife crisis that happens for a lot of people, or there's different ways. This guy back home, he calls it midlife liberation, because he says you just get to a point where you don't care what anyone thinks anymore. But from the midlife crisis perspective, is the idea that like maybe as teenage boys we take on a message, or even younger boys we take on a message that our values through what we achieve, or what we wear, or it's very externally focused, like how am I perceived? Am I good at sport? A lot of it's how am I seen? And then maybe you get into a relationship and you're in the workforce, and then it's more of this how am I being seen? There's so much kind of attention put outside of ourselves as to am I doing okay? And then a lot of people wake up maybe 40 or 50, kids are getting a bit older, maybe they're really established in work, and they start saying, Jesus, my whole life, maybe they wake up one day, I have no idea who I am, but I'm my family and my work. And then there's this rebellion almost, and they leave the wife and get a younger woman and a sports car, and what they're basically doing is reverting back to the 14-year-old and making teenage decisions because that part never grew up.
It's so common. It's funny how everything, we're all like so individual,
Yeah.
but then there's such trends, and even like you said, stages of life where we all are similar in ways, you know.
Yeah, well, I think,
It's so interesting.
a lot of what happens is we get frozen in time in certain aspects of our life, like, you know, it's they talk about the first 7 years of your life are pivotal in the sense that myself and yourself from different places, different backgrounds, probably took on similar messages about what emotions we shouldn't show.
Yeah.
And we both probably developed similar and different strategies to hide those emotions. So be an achiever, be a people pleaser, be a perfectionist, do well in the world, put on muscle, like lots of different strategies, but they're ultimately all trying to hide sadness or grief or fear or shame or anger or pleasure or like so many things that we're told not to feel. And that's your 7-year-old that made that decision unconsciously, and now your 27-year-old, 37-year-old, 47-year-old is just playing out the same pattern from childhood until you wake up and you say, actually, I'm not a 7-year-old boy anymore. I can work with this. And that could be therapy, it could be coaching, it could wherever it might never from.
Yeah.
That's kind of the work I try to do.
It's funny because I would have said up to a couple of years ago, and even I read like about childhood that affects you. I'm like, didn't affect me. It didn't have anything got to do with me. Do you know, because even kind of from like a broken home, things like that. And I was like, no, none of that actually affected me. And I would have swore to you like, but then so you get again. I worked with a mental performance coach, and just getting older and wiser. I'm like, hold on, actually. Yeah, it's just obviously, like you're saying, everything is trying to kind of hide those emotions, you know. Or even for me, it's just, in a way, I suppose it's just denial versus acceptance. And what did they say? It's like what you push away,
What you resist will persist. Yeah.
That's it. So, yeah, it's interesting. And shadow work, the book. Where did the inspiration for that come from?
I started talking about shadow probably 7 or 8 years ago, and like it's one of these words I think a lot of people have heard of, but they're maybe not overly familiar with what
I
it's
was actually going to ask you that. I was
yeah.
like, for people, yeah, because I think everybody has heard of it. But
Yeah. But I got down all these rabbit holes, and I kind of go deep into different things, and I think part of my mission is to like go into the fringes and like find things and bring them back into the mainstream if I can. So I'll be buzzing when this comes out, like it's a mainstream audience, because I think it's powerful work. Shadow work is basically the idea that we all developed a mask in our younger years, again unconsciously. Like we took on messages from family, from friends, from the community, from the culture as to what a man was or what a woman was, who we needed to be. That's ultimately the question, like, who do I need to be safe in the world? Like even in this conversation we're having now, I've decided unconsciously who I need to be safe in this. Like I need to present myself in a certain way, I need to not say certain things.
Yeah.
That it's just happening all the time, and the more safe you feel, the more authentic you can be. But you know, by the time the boy is 8 years old, or the woman is 8 years old, girl is 8 years old, the family has put certain conditions like, okay, don't be angry, this is not ladylike. don't cry, because boys don't cry. And then your culture shows you what a man's supposed to look like or a woman's supposed to look like. Religion tells you what sexuality is appropriate and what's not. Your gender, there's certain things you're expected. There's all these rules that are there in the background. And by the time you've got to 7 or 8, you've kind of shut down half of who you are. So basically, we learned that certain parts of myself will win me love and acceptance, so I'm going to put that forward. And then the opposite of that's going to lead to shame, so I'm going to hide that aspect of myself, and that becomes a shadow that hides in the dark. And we think it goes away, maybe, but really it starts to unconsciously run our lives. So an example might be, what would be an example? Anger is a really common example. You tell your parents, no, I'm not eating my vegetables, and you try to assert the boundary, no, that's not okay with me, and they lose the head, and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to say no, or I'm not supposed to express my need, or what, you take on a kind of childish interpretation of the situation, because you just see everything as black and white as a kid, you don't have context. But then maybe you decide, okay, anger is bad, or assertiveness is bad, and your strategy to hide that part of yourself is to people please, so to put everyone ahead of yourself, to make sure everyone else feels comfortable. But the problem with that is the anger gets turned inward, and you start to attack yourself with toxic shame. So the anger doesn't go away, it just gets turned either inward, or, as you see what most nice people are, people pleasers, at some point they get resentful and they blame the other person. So shadows, the parts that we learn are unlovable, that we've pushed into the dark, but we decided at some point we're wrong, but that if we can take them back out and look at them a little bit closer, we'll see that there's actually gifts. And the best analogy I've heard for it is that it's like you're born into a castle that has 1,000 rooms, and every room in the castle has an amazing gift behind the door, but people start saying, don't go in that room, or that room, or that room. And then you wake up at 30 and you feel like you're in a 2-bedroom, dimly lit apartment, forgetting you're in this castle. And so anger can reclaim your boundaries, grief can bring you alive again and bring joy back into your life. Sexuality can bring aliveness back into your life and remove shame. There's gifts behind all of these doors, but you gotta have the courage to kind of step in.
Yeah. And yeah, it kind of sounds like I'm envisioning like this web of like things that and it's so weird because like that people pleasing, it's like peeling back the layers and then finding out, going to like, that's why I did that, and that's I suppose the beauty of that work is I look at like that symptom versus root cause and like connecting the dots.
Yeah, and a lot of it's about being compassionate in the sense that sometimes people's strategies try to push through things or berate themselves if they're not doing the right thing, or base themselves on what they see on social media, all this kind of stuff. I always tell people you need to bless the parts of you that got you this far. So if you've got a people pleaser, I'm sick of being a people pleaser, all this kind of stuff, take a breath and realise that the people pleasing part was the perfect strategy to keep you safe for years when you didn't feel safe. And now that you see that this is an issue for you, you can thank that part of you, tell them you're safe now, and you can get them to step aside and you can start to have new strategies and finding your voice and stuff like that again. And maybe that strategy of people pleasing is going to still be required every now and then. It's sort of about recognising we're sat opposite each other here. There's not one of us, there's probably a multitude within each of us of thousands of different characters, like perfectionist, tough guy, bully, bullied. There's all these different parts, and typically when we're stressed, we merge with different parts. My inner critic becomes the only voice in my head, or the inner child starts to feel vulnerable, or whatever it might be. So it's about self-understanding rather than self-improvement. That's kind of how I see it now.
That makes sense. Yeah, understanding. That's where. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm just thinking of like different examples of that, and obviously you had to go on that journey yourself. Is it your own work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm still very much the shadow stuff never goes away. Part of it is, the more you identify with one aspect of yourself, the kind of more you'll try to disidentify with the opposites. So a very common one that we've kind of talked about is if you see work ethic as a real virtuous thing, and you want to be strong work ethic, there's a high probability that you deem rest to be lazy. And so you deny your need for rest, which leads to burnout. And so that's an example of maybe the polarity of being too attached to one side of the coin. But for me, it's an ongoing thing. Relationship is the place where your shadow is going to come up the most, because you'll bump up against someone else and they'll get close to your vulnerability, and that's an area of challenge for me for sure. So it's come from my work thus far, and it's I continue to do the exercises that are in the book and continue to kind of notice two maybe practical pieces for people around spotting your shadow. One is projection. So I continue to notice, where do I project? Like, where do I point the finger and say he's this or she's this, realizing there's three fingers pointing back at me. So we project the stuff that's uncomfortable. So if I'm uncomfortable with assertiveness, finding my voice, I'll judge harshly anyone that I deem to be assertive. They're just showing me a part of myself. And equally, there's golden shadow, which is the magic that you have inside you that you denied because someone told you were too much at some stage. So
Yeah.
you're a boy and you're singing and dancing and you're playful, and someone's calm down, grow up. So you shut that part of yourself down, and now you're struggling to be playful. So it's projection is a useful thing to just notice, who do you judge harshly and who do you judge in a positive way, and what are they showing you in yourself. And then the other piece is notice your triggers when you get pissed off. I always encourage people to ask, what's the story I'm telling myself here, and what's the feeling below the story. So if someone shows up late for lunch, I get triggered, I get reactive and all that kind of stuff, or I can check in with myself and say, okay, what's the story I tell myself when my friend was late for lunch? They don't respect my time. And what's the feeling below the story? Sad. So that's really what's going on, I'm sad. But if I don't check in with myself, I'll start saying, you never show up on time, and I start.
Yeah, that's where that communication breaks down, and
Yes.
it's interesting because I've started to try to notice that in myself. It's like, okay, I'm triggered. Why am I triggered? And 9 times it's not the other person; it's whatever feeling that I've associated with that. Because like I'm just thinking, even in relationships, really often I get triggered, and then now thinking about it, it's like, it's not what she said, it's I feel inferior. And when I feel inferior, I don't like feeling like that because of whatever things that happen to me. And I'm like, okay, so it's nothing to do with the other person at all. It's just me having this feeling of inferiority. So I'm like, okay, if I can just let that go, or even express it sometimes. And it's like, when the other person kind of knows, when you say that, they're like, oh, okay, it's nothing to do with me kind of thing. It stops the argument because you create understanding between the people,
Yeah, true connection requires vulnerability, and so I say to people sometimes that when you're in the heat of conflict with someone, your mind will go to a million stories about all the times they've screwed you in the past and all the things they're probably thinking and how you'll have a million stories about them. None of those are factual. You can't know. And the only thing you can know in an argument is what you're feeling. And it's the very one thing we don't want to reveal because it's vulnerable. We want to hide the thing that we actually know and make assumptions about everything else that's happening. So I assume how you're feeling, what you're thinking, how you're trying to judge, all this kind of stuff. If I can have the courage to check in and say, okay, the story I'm telling myself is my partner doesn't respect me, the feeling below it is sadness, and I can say to my partner, I'm sad because a part of me feels that you don't respect me. And maybe that's not what you intend, but that's a very different thing to say. Never show, that vulnerability is the doorway to connection. They want to get heartless. They want to get heartless if they're not going to. It's going to be received differently,
Yeah, it's so true though, because I'm just even thinking with my partner. We used to have this argument about the same thing, and it was just actually a misunderstanding of how each other feels. And then when I actually understood, okay, this is why you get angry or feel like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I won't do that. I can see how that affects you, because that's why I think nearly, those small things that end up exploding, and it's like, actually, it's not about this at all.
The thing is not the thing. Yeah. It's probably for a different day, but there's exercises you can do that are quite nice where you to say, like, you can do an appreciation practice with a partner where you'd say to them, something I appreciate is, and you'd name what it is. So I appreciate that you give me a gift when you're traveling and you're busy. And then you say how it feels. So I feel appreciated and I feel loved when you take the time. And then you would share how that was for you in childhood. Was it similar or different? You would say, my parents would always buy a gift when they were traveling, so it reminds me of that. So it's giving your partner a sense of, okay, it's not just about buying a toy, it's like, oh, it reminds me of what I had in childhood, or maybe what I didn't have in childhood.
Yeah.
Or same with triggers, I was hurt yesterday when you teased me in front of our friends. I felt belittled and unsupported, and it reminded me when I was a boy and people used to make fun of me in front of groups. Suddenly it's a very different thing to, again, pointing the finger. So it's something you appreciate or is challenging, the feeling that you have, not the infinite, so it's your own ownership, and then what it reminds you of from childhood. I think that's a root to connection with a partner.
Yeah, And that goes back to what you said is like, I like that word, like self-understanding, not even improvement, it's just actually understanding why these experiences, thoughts, feelings are happening for you. You know, and then obviously when you kind of get to understand that more, you can change the behavior around it. Or at least when it happens, it's, you know, it's, instead of sending you from 0 to 10, it's like, oh yeah, I know what's happening, you know.
Yeah, it's choice. I share an example in my last book about if you stay in a hotel for the first time and you turn off the light, you go to bed, you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you're going to bang into things because you don't know what's there. You turn the light on and you're like, oh, okay, I just walk around these things. And having self-understanding is similar. It's like stuff is still there, but you're not as likely to trip over because it's not in the dark anymore. There's a famous quote that says, what you're aware of, you're in control of. What you're not aware of is in control of you. So if I can say, okay, well, the reason I use alcohol is because sometimes I feel lonely, so the alcohol helps me quiet my lonely mind. Then the next time I feel myself reaching for beers, oh, I'm lonely, maybe there's a different way. So it opens up choice. That's what we're looking for, really, is choice. Because when we do stupid things, or we stay stuck in the past, it's because we don't see choice and we just go to autopilot.
It's so true, it's so interesting. And is that your kind of goal with the book Shadow Work, is to kind of, I suppose, take that work and bring it to kind of mainstream and give practical advice around it?
Yeah, I feel like the obviously, again, if we look at the last 15 years, the fitness thing became a big thing globally. Like fitness became huge, and then I think the personal development space is really big. You got books like Atomic Habits and Power of Now and all these, like, they're some of the biggest, most best-selling books. And I think that stuff is the work. It's kind of like what we were saying earlier. It works until it doesn't work. So it gets you to a certain point. I feel like as people have grown up reading these books and stuff, a lot of I hope at least, that a lot of the market have kind of matured to the point that they're like, I don't need another book about goal setting. I need to maybe just find a way of addressing what's driving me. So yeah, my hope is it's really that people would see themselves through a compassionate lens. So if you could, like, even as an exercise for anyone listening to this, if you've got behaviours that are currently not serving you, rather than trying to get rid of them, try to understand them. So ask yourself, what does this behaviour give me? Because everything gives you something. So if you drink too much, that might be giving you a quiet mind, social outlet, stress relief. So it's giving you things. And if you can identify what something's giving you, you can then find healthier ways of getting the same thing. So meditation will give you the same benefits. But until you become aware of that, you might struggle. So people could explore their habits that they judge and see if they can see it from a compassionate lens. How is this helping me? Even if it doesn't seem like it's helping you. They can explore their different parts. So the perfectionist or the people pleaser, how is that helping me? And why do I do what I do? Without going to judgment. It's not easy, but I think that's powerful work for people.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm like reminded of myself there where you're saying like the personal development jokey type of thing. I'm that type of person which is like, okay, habits. I'm gonna read every book that there is on habits.
Yeah.
Same with, I've done that with everything in my time. But yeah, you get to a point it's like, can you read another book of is Atomic Habits coming out with new habits or new ways? Like,
it's a way of avoiding the deeper work. I mean, I say that from lived experience, still falling into that trap that one of the biggest ways we avoid the shadow is to intellectualize things. So have great ways of, I'm great at that, talking about the ideas, but actually they still struggle with actual what's below the surface kind of thing. So yeah, the abundance of personal development books. Like one thing I share in the new book is people don't even need to buy the new book because I'll share it here, is that you can read all the books under the sun, but if you just look at your life and ask yourself, what is life trying to teach me in this chapter, you'll see everything you need to know. Your life is giving you the feedback all the time as to what you need. You probably don't need a book about habits or whatever it is. There's probably something happening in your life right now that's challenging, and you just address that head on rather than distracting yourself with books. I'll say that again.
Yeah, buy the book first and then realise it.
Yeah. But life can be overwhelming, I think, so it's useful to just sit and say, what's life trying to teach you here? And what can I do with what's happening in my life?
Yeah. And nearly, for some people, nearly sounds too simple. As in, like, we want a big, complex answer, or it must be something, this guy has it, or it's going to be in this next book that I read.
But it's the same as fitness, right? It's like, I don't know if you know this. When I remember getting my first set of weights when I was 14, I think I was. It was a York dumbbell, from Argos, like this dumbbell and Dumbbells and barbell, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a little poster on it, and it gave you a workout. It was a full body workout. You do it 3 days a week. You start with 3 sets of 6, I think. The following week you do 7, then 8, then 9, then 10. Then you up the weight, you start at 6 again. It was like the most simple progressive overload. And my first 3 months probably lifted. I bought the best results I've ever got in my life. I was like 15 stone when I was like 16, solid muscle, and you know. And then I start reading like all these T Nation and bodybuilder.com, and start like reading Muscle and Fitness, The Rock's on the cover of Men's Health. I'll do the Rock's workout, not realizing he's worked out for 30 years before the workout that's in the thing. I start over complicating everything and changing the plan all the time, and suddenly the thing that was getting the results has become so diluted. And I think it's the same with everything, that there's basics. Like if you're in a relationship, taking an hour in the week where you have a day together where your phones are off and expressing gratitude with each other every day, that's probably like the basics. You know? Can't outrun the basics. Fitness, lifting weights 3 times a week and eating a lot of protein is probably your basics. There's basics in everything. But we distract ourselves with shiny object.
Me too. See,
Me too.
It was like even training. I always look back like, because it's like every 4 weeks I was on a new and a new science. I was reading more studies and then constantly changing. And I was like, you know, if I just probably did the same thing for 5 years, 3 times a week, and just added a little bit more weight reps, I'd be so far ahead.
Yeah.
But in a way, I'm glad, because at least for me, I have the experiences that I can now share with good people. So it's like, you know, basically anything anyone comes to me with, I'm like, yeah, I've done that. You know, I'm like, I drank raw eggs. I don't know why, but I thought I'd seen Vince McMahon do it. He was big.
I used to get up at 3 in the morning, drink a protein shake, and get catabolic when I'm like 15. It was like crazy stuff. But yeah, the fundamentals. I mean, you know, life we can complicate things, can't we? Because
Yeah. We're complex creatures, but then, like you said, a lot of it is the basics and keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Try and do the deep work.
I think we're going from the information age to the age of wisdom, and like information age was we've gone from a couple of decades ago it was near impossible to get. You know, imagine when you get a workout plan a couple of decades ago, you'd have to order online. No, you couldn't order online.
Yeah.
You have to write to someone and get. I don't even know how. Like, I think it was the 1950s. It was Charles Atlas, and these guys were sending out the first manuals, and every book gets it. So that's what you were looking at back then, to get like a simple workout plan. Now you can get anything you need online. There's an abundance of information, but where we've gone astray now is there's a lack of application. So there's a lack of wisdom, because everyone's an expert, but nobody's actually not nobody. But, you know, you see it. I mean, where we are here, Pereira now, every second person is like a 20-year-old fitness trainer and stuff like that. Some of them are amazing, some of them are more marketeers. But yeah, it's a difference. It may sound like an old man.
Yeah, it is the wisdom. Can you have wisdom in 2 years or whatever, you know, that you've done?
Some of them, I think, you know, some of them are great. It's just, it's just things have changed.
And I always think of those, like, you know, the old school bodybuilding guys, that it's like, what they're doing in the 60s and 70s are even coming back around now, but like 50 years later, they're like, oh, they were right. They were kind of right in some of the stuff they were doing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like...
So much stuff from back in the day. Freud was one of the first psychoanalysts or whatever back in the day, and I met a fellow the other day who's a breath worker. He's a breath science guy, and he was saying basically Freud had these theories about our dreams and how our dreams tell us what's going on in our lives. And now, like 100 years later, neuroscientists have mapped what's happening in your brain during a dream, and he had it spot on back then. It's kind of crazy. He knew exactly, you know. So it's,
imagine the work that's gone in from there to the neuroscientists to get to the same outcome.
Yeah. And I've always I think I have a mentality of, it's got me in trouble a little bit maybe, or like I'm sure people judge me for it sometimes, that I'm not going to wait until I know I have the exact science that I was before. Like, I'm going to make mistakes when I put books out. I'm just going to share what I know, kind of thing. Because sometimes people are too consumed with getting it perfect and not being called out or something. I think you need to learn in public and be willing to learn and do the work, but put things out there. Because I mean, you look at yoga is thousands of years old, and it's helped people for thousands of years, and now the science is catching up. But do we really need the science? I suppose it's useful to have it, but if I was waiting for this, some people live in the academics to avoid the actual work, I suppose.
That's so true. And even me, I just remember when I first started in the fitness industry, I was so afraid to say anything. I would be like, it has to be science backed, I have to look at the study. I was like, even that, and now I'm like, I just think I'll just give my opinion on anything. And they're like, why? I'm like, 15, you can do it at 15 years, it seems to be okay, you know.
What's that? Hippocrates? Is it Hippocrates? Isn't that your man's name? Your man's name back in the day was like, do no harm. Isn't that the first thing? So like, something not doing no harm. But our grandparents probably had as good nutritional advice as anyone now. So it's basics. Basics. In a world of complexity, can we make things more simple for the solution?
Yeah, I think that's really the key now, is like simplicity. Even for myself, I'm always thinking. I don't know if it's distracting. I like complexity, as in I like the science of all stuff. But then it's like, I think it was Luke Lehman said it. It's like human body, like very, very complex. What you need to do to take care of it, there's 10 things: laugh, smile, lift weights. That's it. He was like, I know all the ins and outs. People just need to do these things. That's all. You know? And it really is. You literally had 10 points of like, get sunlight, connection with people, laugh. That's life.
Well, look, granted, if you're a trainer, you probably, it makes sense that you go deeper on it, but we all probably need only one area that we go fully in on that way, and then the other areas we should probably trust the experts or just trust whoever's kind of done it.
Anyway, Pat, thank you so much for joining me, because I could literally stay here just talking and chatting. But if people want to know more and obviously order your book, where can they find you? Where can they go?
Thanks for having me. It's been good. The book is it's in all good bookshops, isn't that what they say? So it's Eason's back home and all the other bookshops, Amazon for people who are outside of Ireland, patdivilly.com is my website. And, that's me.
Just want to thank you again for joining me today. It's been a brilliant conversation, and guys, I hope you all enjoyed it as well, and we will catch you all in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's show, please take a moment to leave us a review and share it with someone who could benefit. Every single review or share helps us grow the show and will allow us to keep bringing you more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes where we'll be sharing more tips and insights to help you take your health, fitness and mindset to the next level. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, consistency beats perfection. See you in the next episode.